Alex, I was looking at that old project truck in the back of the shop today, the one that's more oxidation than actual steel. And it hit me. We used to spend 3 days with a hacksaw and a prayer just to clear a wheel well. Now, we're basically using a lightning bolt captured in a ceramic nozzle to melt through reality itself.
A lightning bolt captured in a nozzle? That's a bit dramatic even for you, Tiger, but I get it. The first time I saw a plasma cutter in action, it felt like cheating. It's like the universe gave us a delete button for metal.
It really is. But the problem is, people treat it like a hot knife through butter, and then they wonder why their butter looks like it was chewed on by a caffeinated beaver. I spent years, absolute years, thinking I was just bad at it until I realized I was treating the machine like a glorified blowtorch.
Well, that's why we're here today. We're doing a deep dive into the art of the plasma arc. Because while it looks easy, there's a massive gulf between I cut this in half and I cut this so clean I don't need 4 hours with a flap disc afterwards. So, Tiger, for the folks who just unboxed their first unit, where does the magic actually start?
It starts way before you pull the trigger. It's about the lungs of the operation. Everyone talks about the amperage, but nobody respects the air. I remember trying to cut some 3/8 plate for a gate hinge years ago. I had the compressor screaming, the moisture trap was bone dry, or so I thought, and the arc kept sputtering like a wet firecracker.
Let me guess. You had water in the lines?
Not just water, it was practically a swamp in there. If your air isn't dry and your pressure isn't dialed, you're just wasting expensive copper consumables. You want that air at about 60 to 70 psi for most hobby units, but it has to be clean. Moisture is the absolute enemy of a stable plasma arc. It's the difference between a surgical incision and a jagged mess.
And speaking of the machine itself, I see people getting hung up on the rated versus sever cut specs. It's like buying a car that says it goes 160 miles per hour. Sure, it can, but you probably shouldn't try it on your way to the grocery store.
Exactly. If the box says rated cut ½ inch, that means you can zip through it at 15 inches per minute and it'll look pretty. If it says Seaver 3/4, that means the machine is going to be sweating, you're going to be crawling, and the underside of that cut is going to have more dross than a sunken pirate ship. Always buy for the rated thickness you use most, not the Seaver thickness you might touch once a year.
Okay, let's talk shop setup. I've watched you spend 10 minutes just cleaning a spot for the ground clamp when you could have just clipped it to the rust and started sparking. Is that just you being a perfectionist? Or is there a method to the madness?
Believe me, I'm not a perfectionist by choice. It's a habit born of frustration. A plasma cutter is a circuit. If you clip that ground to a layer of crusty rust or a thick coat of paint, the electricity has to fight its way through that junk just to get home. It generates heat in the wrong places and makes the arc jumpy. I always take a quick pass with a wire wheel right where that clamp sits. You want metal on metal intimacy, Alex.
Metal on metal intimacy. I'm putting that on a t-shirt. But seriously, once you're grounded and the air is dry, the actual technique is where I see people struggle. The drag versus standoff debate.
Most modern beginner torches have a drag shield, which is a godsend. It lets you rest the nozzle right on the work. But if you're doing high amperage stuff or using an older torch, you need that 1/8 inch of daylight. If you're too close, you double arc and blow your tip out. Too far, and the arc just wanders off like a bored teenager.
What about the speed? That's the hardest part for me to gauge. If I go too fast, I'm not cutting all the way through. And if I go too slow, I'm basically melting a canyon into the plate.
Watch the sparks. That's the secret nobody looks at. If the sparks are shooting straight down, you're usually okay. If they're spraying back up at your face, you're moving too fast. The arc hasn't made it through the basement yet. But if you see the sparks trailing behind at about a 15 to 20 degree angle, that's the sweet spot. That's where the dross, the leftover melted metal, stays soft and just pops off with a light tap of a hammer.
You mentioned dross. I think that's the biggest expectation versus reality shock for new users. They expect a laser clean edge, and they get this hardened slag on the bottom. Is that always a speed issue?
Mostly speed or amperage. If you're crawling along like a snail, you're putting too much heat into the metal, and that molten soup just hangs out on the bottom and welds itself back on. We call it slow speed dross. It's a nightmare to grind off. But if you get your travel speed up, the air pressure actually blows that molten metal clear away before it has a chance to get cozy with the edge.
I've noticed you also use a lot of straight edges. You're not exactly a freehand kind of guy when it comes to long cuts.
My hands haven't been steady since the 90s, Alex. If I try to freehand a 4-foot rip in sheet metal, it'll look like the coastline of Maine. I keep a piece of 1/4 inch aluminum bar stock specifically as a guide. Aluminum is great because the plasma arc doesn't want to jump to it like it does to steel. You just have to remember to offset for the distance between the center of the nozzle and the edge of the shield.
That's a pro tip. I usually just mark a line with a soapstone and hope for the best. But the light from the arc is so bright I lose the line halfway through.
Oh, that's a classic mistake. You're looking at the arc itself. It's like staring at the sun. Don't do that. You want to look just ahead of the torch and use a proper shade. A lot of people try to use a shade 5 oxyacetylene pair of goggles, but for high-amp plasma, you really need a welding helmet set to shade 9 or 10. If you can't see where you're going because you're blinded, you're going to wander.
Let's pivot to safety for a second, because we're talking about 20,000 degrees Fahrenheit here. This isn't a hot glue gun.
It really isn't. And it's not just the heat, it's the fumes. When you're vaporizing galvanized steel or even just painted scrap, you're breathing in stuff that'll make your head spin in the worst way. I don't care if you have the shop door open, get a fan behind you blowing the smoke away, or better yet, wear a respirator. I learned that the hard way after an afternoon of cutting old trailer frames. I felt like I'd swallowed a bag of rusty pennies for 3 days.
I think we've all been there with the it's just one quick cut mentality. And then 20 minutes later, the shop is full of blue haze and your lungs are protesting.
And watch your feet. Those little molten berries of steel, the slag, they have a way of finding the one hole in your boot or the cuff of your pants. Wear leather, always. Synthetic fabrics will just melt onto your skin, and that's a brand you don't want to carry.
Talk to me about consumables. How do I know when the tip is toast? Because they aren't exactly cheap if you're burning through them every hour.
The biggest tell is the hole in the nozzle. It starts as a perfect circle. The moment it looks like an oval, or you see a little notch worn into one side, your arc is going to start coming out sideways. You'll notice your cuts are beveled. One side will be straight, and the other will have a weird angle. If the electrode, the little bit inside, has a deep pit in the center, maybe more than a 1/16 of an inch deep, swap it out. If you wait too long, the whole thing can catastrophically fail, which is just a fancy way of saying it'll melt the end of your torch into a puddle of regret.
A puddle of regret. That's the title of your autobiography, isn't it?
Chapter 1. Why we don't cut near the gas can.
Actually, that leads me to an interesting point about different metals. Most people buy these for mild steel. But what about aluminum or stainless? Does the lightning bolt behave differently?
Oh, absolutely. Aluminum is a heat sink. It sucks the heat away from the cut faster than steel does. You usually need to bump up the amperage and move a bit quicker, and it stays molten longer, so the dross can be a bit more stubborn. Stainless is the opposite. It cuts like a dream, very crisp, but it produces some nasty hexavalent chromium fumes, so that's when the respirator is non-negotiable.
We've covered the how, but let's talk about the where. You do a lot of work on pipes and tanks. That feels like a different ballgame than just slicing a flat plate on a table.
It's all about stability. If you're cutting a pipe, you can't just drag. You have to rotate the pipe or move your body in a way that keeps the torch at that 90-degree angle the whole way around. I've seen guys try to wrist it, and the cut ends up looking like a spiral staircase. And tanks, man, if you're cutting an old fuel or air tank, you better be 100% sure it's purged. I've seen a guy blow a shop door off its hinges because he thought empty meant safe.
That's terrifying.
It is. You fill those things with water or inert gas before you even think about bringing a spark near them. There are no do-overs with pressure vessels.
You know, for all the technical talk about PSI and amperage and travel speed, there's something really artistic about it. I've seen you do some pretty intricate scroll work with a hand torch that looks like it came off a CNC table.
It's just practice, Alex. It's like learning to play an instrument. At first, you're just making noise. You're blowing holes in things and getting frustrated. But eventually, you start to feel the resistance of the arc. You hear the sound. A good plasma cut should sound like a consistent, high-pitched hiss, like tearing a piece of silk. If it sounds like a frying pan full of bacon, something is wrong.
I love that. Tearing silk. It really does have a specific rhythm to it. So, if you had to give one final piece of advice to the person standing in their garage right now, looking at their new machine with a mixture of excitement and terror, what would it be?
Don't be afraid to make a mess. Grab a bucket of scrap, stuff you don't care about, and just start blowing holes. Move too fast on purpose. Move too slow on purpose. See what happens when you tilt the torch. You have to learn the language of the machine before you can ask it to do anything beautiful. And for heaven's sake, keep your air dry.
Keep your air dry. Words to live by. I think the big takeaway today is that a plasma cutter isn't just a shortcut. It's a precision instrument that happens to be very, very loud and very, very hot.
Well put, it's a tool that rewards patience and punishes laziness. But once you get that first perfect dross-free drop, man, there's no feeling like it. It's like you finally mastered the elements.
Thanks for the deep dive, Tiger. I think I'm actually brave enough to go try that exhaust cut now.
Just maybe move the lawnmower out of the way first.
Noted.